Good evening, everyone, and welcome. And I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and acknowledge the elders past, present, and emerging, and extended respect to other Indigenous Australians present. I would also like to recognise that we are on unceded land and that Indigenous people have been custodians of the lands and waterways of Australia for more than 60,000 years and our first teachers and educators. And furthermore, I acknowledge the place of Indigenous knowledges in academy. So welcome to the first Dean's Lecture of 2025 series, a special event in celebration of International Women's Day. And I just want to pause you for a second because a number of colleagues here have approached me and said, don't you think that it's ironic that you as a male are introducing International Women's Day, where I'm a dean and this is a Dean's Lecture. Pasi can explain himself later on how he's doing that, but welcome. My name is Marek Tesar, and I'm delighted to be here as the new Dean of the Faculty of Education at the University of Melbourne. Today is my day 3 at the university, day 5 in a country, and I'm absolutely, so please be patient with me, and I'm absolutely pleased and honored to be hosting this public event and to have the chance to address you, all of you here tonight. So, as I mentioned earlier, this lecture is in celebration of International Women's Day, a day that honors the achievements of women across all aspects of life, social, economical, cultural, and political, while also advocating for gender equality. We are very fortunate to welcome Ms. Jutta Urpilainen tonight, who, in conversation with Pasi Sahlberg, will explore her own leadership journey and reflect on the urgent need for inclusive leadership in educational systems worldwide. She will also explore the critical impact of female leadership, from shaping policies that foster equal opportunities to inspiring the next generation of change makers. Finally, there will be plenty of time for audience participation, and I invite you and to consider questions for Jutta for later discussion. I would also like this opportunity to tell you about Jutta and her extraordinary career so far. Ms. Jutta Urpilainen is the chair of the Global Education Monitoring GEM Report Advisory Board, appointed by UNESCO Director General. The GEM report has received a mandate from the world's governments to monitor and report on the progress on Sustainable Development to Goal number 4, quality education, at the World Education Forum. During the years 2019 to 2024, Jutta served as the European Commissioner for International Partnerships for the European Union. In this position, she has overseen the European Commission's work on international cooperation and sustainable development, and been a strong advocate for global education, gender equality, social justice, and youth participation. Under her leadership, the EU launched the Global Gateway Strategy, a bold new initiative that brings together the EU, its member states, and the European Development Finance Institution to mobilize up to 300 billion euros of investments of public and private funds for sustainable, high-quality projects, including for global education. Before joining the Commission, she served as a member of the Finnish Parliament for almost 17 years. In 2008, she became the first woman leader of the Social Democratic Party of Finland. From 2011 to 2014, Jutta also served as Finland's Deputy Prime Minister and the first female finance minister. During the time, she became closely involved in developmental issues, joining the Development Committee of the World Bank Group and IMF. She also served as the Foreign Minister's Special Representative on Mediation and chaired the Finnish National Commission for UNESCO. Jutta has a master's degree in educational science from University of Jyväskylä, and before entering politics, she worked as a teacher in comprehensive schools, so welcome back home. This is your place. More recently, in December 2024, Jutta was awarded the Grand Cross of the Order of the Lion of Finland, presented by the President of Finland, congratulations, and granted in recognition of her work done in service for the nation. The International Women's Day campaign theme for 2025 is March Forward for All Women and Girls. The theme calls for urgent action to unlock equal rights, power, and opportunities. And we heard from Larissa and Sophie about how important that is, and from all of you here. Central to this vision is empowering the next generation, youth, particularly young women and girls, as catalysts for lasting change. I'm sure you will agree that as a champion of global education, Jutta's commitment to advocacy for gender equality, social justice, and youth participation, she encompasses the very essence of this theme. So it gives me great pleasure now to welcome Ms. Jutta Urpilainen and Professor Pasi Sahlberg to join the stage for the conversation titled Breaking Barriers, Women, Leadership, and the Future of Education. Welcome.
Yeah, good evening. Finally, people welcome Jutta. How are you?
I'm fine. I was sitting 90 minutes in Uber, so I'm very relaxed, I have to say.
Is this your first time in Melbourne?
This is indeed.
Okay.
So now I know better the city.
Yes.
I'm prepared for the next time.
Yeah. So let's get to the conversation immediately. And just like Marek, you promised that there will be time for questions, and we definitely going to do that as well. And also, if anybody feels like you need to go, that you have other commitments, don't hesitate to do that. And we apologize the thing. But in the introduction, we also heard that you actually started as a primary school teacher in a primary school classroom in Kokkola.
Yes.
That is the
actually in Helsinki first.
You started in Helsinki, all right. Okay.
Yeah.
But obviously, anybody who's sitting next to a wonderful female leader, global and national, has a question that, so what made you change your mind in a way that you left the classroom and decided to go to politics and then do all this rest of these things?
That's actually a very good question, because I have to tell you that I really enjoyed my work as teacher. That was lovely. I was first in Helsinki, and then I moved to my home city, Kokkola, which you also know well.
There's actually a picture from Torkinmäki.
Yes.
Do you remember the morning when this picture was taken?
Yes, I still remember that. In the previous night, I was elected to the Finnish parliament as the first woman from my region ever. I was 27 years old, and I have to tell you that I never thought that I would be elected. So it was a big surprise for me and also my campaign team, but also for my principal in my school, as well as all my pupils.
Who, by the way, asked to say hello to you.
Thank you very much. But why I decided to run for the Finnish parliament, I think it was because I really wanted to make an impact to my community, to my country. And I had been active in politics, so I thought that maybe through politics I can, make a broader and wider impact. And indeed, at the age of 27, I was elected to the Finnish parliament. At the age of 32, elected as a first female leader for the Social Democratic Party, which is a very traditional Labour party in Finland. And at the age of 35, then elected as a first female finance minister in Finland. So I know how to break glass ceilings. But I want to underline that it is important to break glass ceilings, but it is even more important to make sure and ensure that there are also people who are following your path. And that's why I'm, for instance, so happy and proud that we had another female party leader in my party, who is Sanna Marin. You might have heard about her, but after my journey. So I think making impact, that has been the driving force for me. And but you never know. I might go back to the classroom one day, because I really see that as an option.
Yeah, I remember there was one interview, I think it was a time when you just started as a finance minister. That was unheard in Finland, the young female politician leading the Finland's economy, and that was a very particular time. There was somebody was asking you a question that you went through the master's-based primary school teacher education, the University of Jyväskylä. Yes. And there was a question that, is there anything that you learned during your teacher education that has been helpful or you think will be helpful as a finance minister? Do you remember what you said?
I know how to teach math. Did I mention that? No.
Yeah, no. I think you also said that you know how to handle people.
People, yeah, that's
and
true.
lead people, and that's a kind of it was a beautiful way of kind of endorsing the importance of teacher education as well. But now, if you think afterwards, because that's your initial training, you spent 5 years studying education and teaching, primary school teaching. That what are some of those things that have remained with you, and you kind of returned back and said that this is something that I saw in a classroom or school, and I'm kind of building my skills on those things?
Well, first of all, I think that at least for me, to become a teacher means that you have to be open-minded, and you have to be able to multitask. And you have to be able to work with very different kind of personalities and with different kind of pupils and people. And I think all those skills actually are required also when you are a political leader, or when you are commissioner, or when you are principal, or when you are in the leading position, I would say also in the private sector. I think that my education has been a very good basis to be a political leader.
Yeah. We often ask questions like, what type of advice would you give to young Jutta 20 years ago, if you now knowing what you know as a female leader in different positions, and some of those things that would probably help you if you knew them earlier on?
I think one of them would be that don't be afraid of making mistakes. And I would also like to challenge, I don't know how you are training and educating new teachers here in Melbourne University, but I think in general, I think at least from my perspective in Finland, at the school we focus quite a lot on mistakes. And I think that if you are afraid of making mistakes, you cannot be creative. Mm-hmm. And I think this is something I would like to tell younger Jutta, that don't be afraid of making mistakes, because I think everybody makes mistakes. And that's natural, but don't repeat the same mistakes. I think that would be an important lesson to learn.
But somebody might say that in politics it's quite rare that somebody comes and say that as a politician or minister or leader, I made a mistake. Do you still think that that's a kind of fair
I would
lesson?
like to change the culture of making mistakes, because no one is perfect. And especially times like this, I mean, and also when I was the finance minister in the middle of financial crisis and euro crisis, there was book where we could read that how to solve a euro crisis. Yeah. So it's like navigating and trying to find the best solutions. And I think it's a similar situation now if you look at the geopolitics, for instance, how to end the war in Ukraine or so forth. So I think you have to be, you have to understand that no one is perfect, neither politicians or teachers.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about the women in educational leadership. That's one of the themes that we are talking about here, and it's before we go to the Global Education Monitoring Report. But based on your experience in your journey from all the way from Finland to Brussels and then around the world, what do you see as the biggest barriers to women as leaders in education?
I would say tradition and stereotypes, missing of role models. I think still in many countries, even though the great majority of teachers are women, majority of principals are men. And it's because we have this kind of a stereotype or cultural thinking that men are the leaders and then, women are teachers. Of course, it's also a question of training, how much you emphasize all those possibilities for young women who are studying to become a teacher. That one day you can become you can also work as a principal or as a Minister for Education, for instance. So how much you open the different paths and mindset for young women about their future. But I still say that, I would say that still the biggest barrier is this kind of stereotype or tradition in many countries around the world.
Do you have anything to share with, particularly those here who think that have experienced similar things? That how have you tried to break those barriers, the attitudes and things that you face as a female leader?
Well, when I was the Commissioner for International Partnerships in the European Union, we adopted a gender action plan. It was already number 3, where we set a certain target that 80% of our funding should have a gender component. I also appointed special advisors on youth, 4 different female leaders from Africa, South America, also from Asia, advising me. And then I also started different kind of programs through which I try to encourage young women to become politicians. So as a leader, I try to be a role model, but also I try to emphasize and invest in different kind of programs through which we were able to encourage young people to be in the leader position. But as I said, I truly believe in role models also. I think it's important to have those, personalities who are paving the way, who are encouraging young people. And one of examples I used as a commissioner to do that was my youth sounding board. So I selected or appointed 25 young people across the world. By the way, I received 4,500 applications, so it was very difficult to appoint 25 young people of them. And with this youth sounding board, we worked very closely. I was their mentor in a way, but at the same time, I got a lot of information and ideas from them. And together with my youth sounding board, we also prepared the first ever youth action plan for the European Union's external relations. And now I'm following all my youth fellow colleagues across the world via social media and try to encourage them to make their dreams come true.
So who are your role models or have been in female leadership? Who are you looking at?
That's a good question. I think in politics, Tarja Halonen, who was the first and so far the only female president of Republic in Finland, I think she has been my mentor and my friend and supporter. But also I want to tell you that when I started my teaching career in Helsinki, I was very young at that time, so I had my teacher mentor. So I had also one older teacher, also female teacher, who was my mentor. And I met her regularly, and I got very good advices from her. And that's why I'm very friend of this kind of, or supporter of this kind of mentorship programs, because I think that where you have an older and younger colleagues working together, meeting regularly, it can be very fruitful cooperation.
Yeah, there must be some young women here in the audience who kind of aspire to lead a school or lead in education. Is there anything else that you would like to recommend them other than the mentoring and coaching in order to have a kind of a smoother pathway into leadership?
I think very often when I talk to young women who are working as teachers, I think they are underestimating themselves a bit. That okay, am I brave enough, or am I good enough?
But that's a typical, that's a Finnish way of thinking.
Yeah, but
as well.
I don't hear men asking those questions themselves.
In Finland, they do.
Do they? I haven't noticed that, but very often it's like and then very common question is also that okay, how can I cope my my family life and my working career? If I'm a principal, can I then, take care of my kids? So I think these kind of questions are very, very common, especially for young women. And my message is that you can do it. Don't underestimate yourself. You can make your dreams come true. Everything is possible. You just have to believe in yourself. And this is what I would like to say to all of you wonderful young female students, which I see here today.
And mentoring is important, can help in
yes, of course, because we face, or I can tell from my own experience, that I faced very challenging situations in my classroom, because my school in Helsinki was multicultural, and I felt that I didn't get any tools from my education to work with multicultural classroom, so and pupils from different backgrounds. So, for instance, to that I got a lot of good advices from my mentor. And that is a very simple example.
Yeah, Jutta, let's spend last few minutes that we have in this conversation before we have the others to join. Talk a little bit about the global education monitoring report that is probably the closest to your work right now. And the current report is called Leadership in Education, Lead to Learn. And you know that very well because you have wrote it forward. And but if there's a kind of a general question about what are we learning from this new work that UNESCO has done about the role of women in senior leadership around the world?
Well, indeed.
What are some of the takeaways and main lessons there?
Well, I think very, in a nutshell, the main message is that, as I said, most teachers are women, while most of school leaders are men. The share of female principals in primary and secondary education is, on average, at least 20 percentage points lower than the average share of female teachers. And this must be changed, of course. And this is not only, if we look at, the leadership gap, it doesn't exist only at primary and secondary school level. It exists also at local education authorities and political institutions. So it's very, I would say, broad and wide challenge. And then, of course, there are a lot of different kind of data in our report that what are the main challenges, but also some recommendations how to change the situation.
Yeah. One thing that I found interesting in that report is that you refer to some of the studies and research around the world that is actually arguing that the female leadership in education can lead to improved outcomes, quality. So that the female leadership somehow focuses on different things or sees similar things in different ways. Is there anything can you comment on that point?
Yes, I can. I think what we have learned through these different researches is that when women do take leadership role, they often bring highly effective leadership styles that benefit schools and students, including the promotion of collaborative leadership styles. I think this is something I have noticed myself in the schools where I had a female principal, that, female principal is more inclusive in a way. But also the prioritization of emotional well-being, so commitment to equity and social justice, all of which contribute to a positive and inclusive education climate. And when you, Pasi, refer to different regions, actually it was interesting to notice that in the US, research has shown that female principals dedicate more time to goal setting and inclusive decision making. In Africa, female school leaders are recognized for creating safer, more collegial environments, especially benefiting girls' education. So I think it's very interesting to notice also those regional differences.
Yes, yeah. The last one here is really about higher education. We are in one of the oldest universities here in Australia. This university was established in 1853. And this year celebrates the first time when we have a female vice chancellor, Professor Emma Johnston. And this obviously is a worth celebrating, particularly in a week like this. But before we get the audience joining us, if you look at the world globally and from the higher education point of view, it must be even starker the kind of imbalance or inequality when it comes to gender senior leadership in higher education.
It is because actually women represent the majority of higher education as students. So if you look at the students in higher education worldwide, women are majority. But they are significantly underrepresented in senior leadership roles. So I think this is very interesting that now if we see, and actually this is a topical question also in my own country, in Finland, that why we see more and more female students in university and male are going to secondary, technical and other vocational education and training, indeed, vocational education and training, not the universities. But if you look at the leadership level, female leaders are still lacking. So women hold only 25% of leadership, 25% of leadership roles in the top 200 higher education institutions worldwide. In Australia, I have the figure here, it's 37% of academic leaders were women in 2021. So less than 40%. But I want to underline that Australia has prioritized leadership development among First Nations leaders and their participation in key governance positions. I don't know how many female ministers you have currently, but of course, this is an initiative that others can learn from. By the way, it's interesting figure that less than 1 in 3 ministers of education which were appointed in 2023 were women. If you look at the defense ministries, or if you look at finance ministries, 12% were leading defense ministries' portfolios, female, 12%, and 14% leading fiscal and financial affairs, 14%. And I would like to say that I think that if we had more women as finance ministers, we would also invest more in education. This is my honest opinion. And I share my concern because if you, especially from the European point of view, where we are talking a lot about security and defense, and everybody is, increasing their defense budgets, but no one is talking about education and human investments in human capital. And as a former finance minister, I know that investments in education also have a very good and high return. But unfortunately, the world is not supporting us at the moment, but that's why we need to fight.
That's why we do that. And I put it here as a reminder, the cover page of the latest GEM report. And this is the last paragraph that you wrote, actually. There,
yes.
And I wanted to put it there because it actually highlights that this is much more than a conventional report of reporting things. There's also, as you write there, that there's also ideas to share and topics to be discussed about the leadership and female leadership as well. But let's stop here because I can see that there's a audience is anxious, probably rather asking questions than go home yet. So hold on for a moment, and I'm opening this for you now, just to keep in mind a couple of things about. Questions, like the question is something that ends in a question mark, and the other rule is that the question should be shorter than the answer. to what you're asking. So, but any other than that, you can ask whatever you want. We have a first one over there. Yes, sir.
Kiitos paljon. That was really, really informative. My question, I'm just curious, is there any data about why you see the prevalence of a lot of female teachers but male principals? So any reason why that occurs?
Do we collect questions or?
Yeah, we can take if is there somebody else?
I write it down.
Right now, Therese.
Thank you. I'm Therese Hoffenbeck. I'm a director of the Assessment and Evaluation Research Centre, and I really appreciated what you said. I'm also from a Nordic country, Norway. Can you say something about the structural things put in place, which I think you have in Finland, supporting women to take leadership? Because I think also to the question before me, it must have something to do with childcare.
My name's Sophie Special. I'm here at the Faculty of Education and host the faculty's podcast, Talking Teaching. But I wonder about mentoring. It comes up a lot in our podcasts, and in fact we were talking to a guest about it today. You talked about the importance of mentors and the importance of wonderful and impactful women mentors. So I just wonder if you could talk a little bit more about their characteristics or some of the things that they do on a regular basis that make them stand out as exemplar mentors that you've experienced.
Can you take these, Jutta, now,
Yes.
and then we can take some more.
Why we have more male principals, even though we have more female teachers? I think it's a good question. I think there is no single answer what could explain that. I think there are many reasons for that. When I was a student at the University of Jyväskylä, I started my studies 1995. I think in our course we had like 80 students, maybe less than 20 of them were male, so men. Now if I look at, because we still keep in touch with my fellow student colleagues, so if I now look at my classmates or colleagues in my course, I think out of that 20 male students, 15 are principals. And I think this is part of, it's a part of tradition, it's a kind of a stereotype that still in many schools in Finland, you know, if you want to move forward in your career and when you are a teacher, the natural way to do that is to become principal, you know, to become a leader of your school. And somehow, still in Finland, I assume it's also here in Australia, you know, men are more anxious or open to look for that kind of career to become leader of your school. And it's more natural for women, and I would say that it's also a tradition in our culture that, okay, a woman has educated herself to become a teacher, so she stays in that position the rest of her career. And I think this is something which we have to change. And that's why those role models are so important. But I would also suggest that as part of your teacher training, you also open a different kind of mindset, because still the majority of students, at least in Finland, in teacher training are female and are women. So you start open their mindset that yes, it's great and it's a nice occupation, it's a great job to teach, but if you want to do something else in your career, what about more study and train yourself to become a principal? Because at least in Finland you need to have a special course for that. So if you want to become principal, you need to be trained for that position. Structural changes in Finland, I think, of course, one important point is childcare, that it is very well organized. It's also mandatory from the age of 6. So you have to go to preschool, and then, of course, after that you need to go to primary school. And that enables also women to go to work, because they don't have to take care of their kids at home. They can put their kids to kindergarten and childcare, and then focus on their professional lives as well. So I think this is still important, or this is an important aspect. Then I would say that it is interesting to notice that still in Finland, teachers are very highly respected, and it's very difficult to get in. If you want to study to become teacher, it's very difficult to get the place at the university. So, and it's not in terms of money, because if you look at the salaries, that they are not that high, but it's the role of teacher in your own community. And I think that's an important point as well. Then mentoring, I think it's important that when we create this kind of mentorship programs, we also train those mentors, so that, you know, the mentors, they have skills to be mentors, because it's not like a natural job that I can train and I can coach somebody. So I think it's important that if you create this kind of a mentorship program for young teachers, for instance, that also those mentors are trained and they have skills and tools to face and work with those young teachers. I think because it's also it's very personal relationship. You need to have trust, and you need to have this kind of it's not like a mother and daughter. It's not like a sister and sister or siblings, or it's not like a best friend. But it's a person to whom you can trust, with whom you can share sometimes very intimate and difficult situations which you have faced in your classrooms with pupils. So I think it also demands quite a lot from mentor, and that's why I think it requires also special training for those persons who are mentoring. I also want to mention networks, because for me as a female leader, but also as a teacher, it was important to have network. So collegial networks where I can share, you know, how awful it was when I was the first female party leader in Finland, and the main media was writing about my clothes or my nails, and so I had my female politician networks from different countries. So have you experienced this kind of situation where the journalist is more interested in your clothes than in your statement, political statement or opinion? So that's why I think that also not only mentoring, but this kind of different kind of professional networks are important. And traditionally I would say that men has been much better creating those networks than we women. But I always, when I talk to women, I try to encourage them to create those networks, even though they take some of your time, free time. But I think it's worth it definitely to go for lunch or dinner once in a month and share your different experiences. I think it's very useful.
Should we take another round of questions? We don't have too much time left, but we can have two or three brief questions. Yeah, there in the middle, first one.
Hello, my name is Caroline, and I teach English to international students. I also have a background in journalism and writing. I'm very curious to know which global political leaders do you admire and why?
Hi, my name is Rosa Kuusisto, former teacher, also trained in Finland and nowadays living in Australia, working as a learning designer. I really admire your career, Jutta. You've done amazing things and it takes a lot of courage to break those glass ceilings. So my question is, what other tips than networking you have for people like you 30 years ago, breaking those glass ceilings to protect themselves from the shattering glass and hold themselves together without criticism and other comments.
Hello, I'm Bachelor of Arts, a student at Uni Melb, and I belong to India. So my question is, do you have something to suggest for developing nations? Because like back there in India, women barely complete their bachelor's degree, and even if they are teachers, they get married, and if they're getting opportunity to be a principal, they don't take it because they want to have kids, and lot of roles which they have to do in society. So do you have something to comment on developing nations? That's all. Thank you.
Well, when I was the commissioner for international partnerships in the European Union, I had responsibility for over 126 countries across the globe. So I was responsible for the cooperation between the European Union and those countries. So I also visited India. And in those countries, I always firstly wanted to meet young people. When you are commissioner, or when you are the prime minister, or when you are the president, you always meet political leaders. That's part of your job. But for me, it was important also to meet ordinary young people, because it was important to understand the different variety of the country. When I talk to young people, I very often visited schools, universities, startups, civil society organizations. I told them that you should invest in education. You should educate yourself. And not only boys, but also girls. Because especially in third countries, this is still unfortunately the case, that if there are several kids in family, very often the family educate boys, but not girls. And that's why I decided to increase our EU's funding to education from 7% to 13%. So when I started as a commissioner, we spent only 7% of our external funding, so our external budget, to education, and I almost doubled that to 13%. And I had three priorities. First, access to primary education for girls, precisely that we need to enable young children, also girls, to access primary education. Secondly, vocational education and training, because this is a huge challenge in India, but also in other third countries, that there are a lot of young people entering into the labor market, but they don't have required skills. And that's why we need to enable them to study in vocational education and training. And the third one was teacher training, because there is no education without teachers. And if we look at statistics, in many countries, especially in Africa, children, they have access to education, but the quality of education is very poor. And that's why we need to improve the quality of education, and we can do that through teacher training. So I would say that this has been my mantra. This has been like my main message over the past 5 years, that we have to invest in education, also in national budgets, because in many countries the share of education investments is very low. And as I said, when I look at now the discourse in not only in Finland, but also in Europe, in many countries, I don't know what is the state in Australia, how much you use resources from your national budget to education. But if I look at the European Union, 27 countries, unfortunately the share is decreasing at the moment because of defense investments. And this is a pity. So we need to invest financially, but then we have to also change the cultural mindset and stereotypes so that we enable women to study not only at the primary school level, but also at the vocational and even higher education level. But it requires a lot of role models and discussions because it's a kind of change of culture and tradition. What I would like to say, seize the opportunity, because I mean, and this is a very much linked to my message, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Because I think what has been a kind of a, I would say, principle of my personal life has been that, you know, when there is an opportunity, seize that, take it. Go there, jump into water, even though you don't know if you can swim or not, because you will learn in any case. So I think this is, because if you are afraid of making mistakes, and if you are a little bit like unsecured and you think that, can I do it, or am I good enough, or do I make mistake? You don't do it. And you just need to jump, you have to seize the opportunity, you need to find the courage from yourself. And I think this is my main message. And if you fail, but then there's another day. So you can, you know, stand up again. And I think I'm a very good example also of that, because Pasi can really witness that, you know, I have I have made mistakes in my career, and but I have never given up. I have always, you know, stand up and tried again. But and that's why I'm here today.
I must say that that's probably true, but your kind of good things that you have done in Finland and young people exceed those mistakes, and people don't remember those things. So I think that goes behind this, what you are saying.
Yeah. But I think, you know, this is my mentality that if you fail, if you make mistake, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Everybody make mistakes. So you know, just stand up and next day open the door and seize the new opportunities which are ahead of you. I would say, of course, at this position, or my previous position, I would like to say, I had an opportunity to meet a lot of global leaders, and one I really admire, and I'm happy to call her my friend, and I recommend you to follow her also through social media, especially YouTube, is the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. And you never know, she might be the next Secretary General of the United Nations. You never know. At least she might be one of the candidates. But I think she's a very good example of that. You know, you are a political leader in the small country of Barbados. I don't know how many of you know where Barbados is or have visited that. But because of her courage and also, I would say, political commitment and enthusiasm, she has really made her worldwide known. And she has a very, very good reputation in the United Nations. She's fighting for sustainable development goals, so we have a common agenda with her. So if I have to choose one who is really inspiring me, I would say Mia Mottley.
Thank you, Jutta. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And just one advice for you: that if you're serious about returning back to the classroom one day, can I ask you to do it through being a Minister of Education for the 4 or 8 years in Finland before you do that, and then finish your career in a classroom, because I think we definitely need leadership like yours. Now it's my absolute honor and pleasure to invite my good colleague Marcia, Professor Marcia McKenzie, to wrap up this session.
Well, thank you, Pasi, and hello, nice to meet you. It's my honor to give the vote of thanks for this first Dean's lecture under our new Dean, Marek Tesar. Ms. Urpilainen, thanks so much for sharing your remarkable experience that you've had in leadership, including as a woman, and today marking International Women's Day this week. I did a little bit of research to learn more about International Women's Day, and I was interested to learn, its origins were over a century ago at the International Conference of Working Women in 1911, and likely not coincidentally, I learned that it was attended by the first 3 women ever elected to Finnish Parliament, which was interesting, and also then it was marked by the United Nations 50 years ago for the first time in 1975, and it continues to be a rallying point for action on gender equity, as well as against gender-based violence here in Australia and globally. So it's then fascinating to learn more about your experiences, including through your roles in Finnish Parliament and through your current leadership on the board of the UNESCO GEM report. You've offered insight both into the gender-associated barriers to leadership and on strategies that have worked across different generations and at different locations in dismantling these barriers, including for those who come next. These can be difficult conversations to have, in my experience, to discern and effectively raise and address how gender is a factor in the opportunities and challenges of leadership. So your candor on this is appreciated, and I think helps encourage us to have more open conversation on the implicit and often explicit biases that affect all manner of our lives and work, including in higher education. So these include research findings on how gender discrimination shows up in teaching evaluations, in funding successes, and who does the often more invisible caring work in our workspaces, in decisions on leadership roles, and in the resulting implications for workplace well-being, promotion, pay equity, research and teaching impact, and so on. We're now facing extremely regressive gender politics in the US with global implications. This includes on women's reproductive rights and in recognizing and keeping safe people of all genders, including transgender and non-binary young people in schools. This adds to the ongoing gender-based discrimination and violence that people face in many countries around the world every day just for being themselves. And it's great to see you boys here and with your strong woman leader as a mother, because I know in Australia we've been seeing a problem of growing misogyny in schools with young boys in particular, and implications for girls and women teachers as well. So these issues are not going away, and in some cases there's growing issues. So it's great to see counter to that with you and your support for this event and International Women's Day. So I think this conversation tonight then helps us to remember that in Australia and globally, we still have a long way to go to achieve a future of gender equity and free of gender-based harms. You remind us that addressing gender issues needs to be central in our internal leadership here in the faculty and at the university, in government departments of education, and in schools and organizations across the country. It also needs to be central to our partnership work together on furthering equitable education systems and communities, including through education policy and leadership. And I particularly appreciated some of the structural aspects that you mentioned that I think we can think further about as a faculty. For example, we do have a mentorship program, and the university has some women's mentorship programs, but other structures such as the Gender Action Plan you were talking about, sounding boards on gender issues. I think there's lots of opportunities to think about what kind of structures we could put in place, and for those of you working in other settings as well. I also wanted to pick up just on the role of men in this, because there were some comments at the beginning saying, was it appropriate? And I think it's absolutely appropriate because we need men's leadership on gender issues. Absolutely, and I really appreciated your comments around the importance of making mistakes. And I think in any form of allyship, we know you're always going to make mistakes as well. And that's part of doing the work. And if you don't get up and try, you're not going to make mistakes and you're not going to help progress things. So just to encourage absolutely men's feminism and action on all gender issues. So these conversations are extremely important this week as we mark International Women's Day, but also as Larissa signaled at the beginning, it's important to be focusing on gender issues every week of the year. So a sincere thank you for joining us tonight and the conversation, and wishing you all the best with your continued valuable work.
Sincere thanks to Jutta for that inspiring and amazing discussion. You've been the most generous in your knowledge and your sharing with us this evening, and set a high bar for the rest of the remainder of the 2025 series. And thank you so much for showing us how to break that glass ceiling for all women and girls around the world. And thank you also to Professor Sahlberg for the expertly facilitating tonight's conversation and great audience questions. And thank you to Professor McKenzie for your thoughtful comments and tonight's presentation and setting us right. That concludes our event tonight.